Yeah, I kill me.
Hi guys. Hello gorgeous. Today I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite sitcoms from my childhood, ALF. The 4 seasons were released individually many years ago on DVD, but recently they just collected them all into one nice box set available for a very decent price on Amazon. So to give you a quick recap of what you get with the complete set, it comes in 2 individual DVD cases. The first one holding seasons 1 and 2, the second one holding seasons 3 and 4. Made of a pretty good plastic. There were some complaints in the reviews on Amazon of broken cases, but unlike my MacGyver set, this one arrived in pristine condition. You've got some ALF art on the front, looking very charming, biting a rose, and a couple of different pictures on the back. And these are all individual DVDs, not double-sided, which I appreciate. And those 2 big cases fit in this cover, which also features some ALF art, including a kind of a freaky looking full body shot of ALF. ALF debuted on NBC on September 22nd, 1986 with the pilot episode ALF, which stands for Alien Life Form. The premise of the show is that the alien world Melmac has been destroyed and the lone survivor, Gordon Shumway, crashes into the garage of the Tanner family in California. ALF is definitely not an E.T. ripoff though. I would say he's more of a precursor to Michael Scott from The Office. He occasionally has some heartwarming moments, but for the most part, he is a hilarious a-hole. Now this review is just going to focus on the first season of ALF. I'll do the other seasons in later reviews. And what I noticed from beginning to end is that the character of ALF actually has some pretty big tweaks. First is visually. He starts out looking very disheveled, and by the end of the season, he's always very nicely combed. Also in the first couple of episodes, they like to use a lot of full body shots of ALF, where they'll cut from the puppet to a little person in an ALF costume running out of the shot or running across the screen. I remember the full body ALF shots being very creepy when I was a kid, and I don't like them much better right now as an adult. There's just something about it that seems really off to me. I don't know if it's the lack of ear and mouth and eye movement while the person is in the full body ALF costume, or if his body language is just so much different than Paul Fusco's performance of ALF, but thankfully, as the season progresses and towards the end of the season, they hardly ever use those full body ALF shots. And if you do see ALF's feet, it's just because he's sitting on the couch and he has his feet up on the table. It's still Fusco performing him. And I want to touch on Paul Fusco. He is the genius behind ALF. He originally started out as a magician, and I love the story of how the ALF TV show got greenlit at NBC. He went into a meeting with his partner to meet with Brandon Tartikoff and the other executives at NBC, trying to pitch them the idea of this alien that crashes into this hapless family's garage. The executives weren't really warming up to the idea, so seeing is believing, and Paul Fusco pulled ALF out of a garbage bag, put him on his hand, and didn't actually say anything. An awkward silence ensued where all the executives were thinking the puppet was going to say something funny, but Fusco just had ALF stare at all of the different executives and wait, and then eventually he had ALF pick his nose and wipe it on Brandon Tartikoff's jacket, which made all the executives burst out laughing and brought us ALF on NBC. Now some people might think the show is ridiculous and that the puppet looks silly, but after watching this again, so many years after watching it as a kid, I've really been able to appreciate the mastery with which Paul Fusco performs ALF. Maybe that takes a little bit of the magic away of the character of ALF, but he really is an exceptional talent when it comes to bringing life to this puppet. It really reminds me a lot of Jim Henson and how he would perform his Muppets. It's just an intangible magic that you can't put into words. And I think it's really a shame how people just dismiss ALF as being a silly puppet and his show being a silly puppet show, when it's really so much more than that. While it's still a situation comedy, the situation that ALF comes from allows for a lot of not just stupid humor, but some really poignant reflections on mankind as well. There's an episode called Pennsylvania 65000 where ALF learns of the existence of nuclear weapons on Earth, and so he uses Willie Tanner's shortwave radio to contact the president and warn him about the impending doom of the planet, since that was the fate of ALF's planet Melmac. but the US government misinterprets it as a threat and hilarity ensues. But throughout all these funny situations, there is still that tiny bit of gravitas that the character of Gordon Shumway comes from a destroyed world where all of his friends and family are dead and he's the sole survivor of this planet, or one of the few sole survivors. There's also a really sweet episode called Me Rhonda, where two of Alf's old friends, who also survived the destruction of Melmac, offer to pick him up and take him to a new planet where they are starting a new Melmacian civilization. It looks like Alf is ready to pack his bags and bail when he changes his mind and decides to stay with the Tanner family, because they're his new family. Or maybe it's because he's a parasite and he wants to keep eating their food and trying to eat their cat. One of Alf's most charming characteristics is that he has an insatiable appetite for cats. The show is definitely something that started as one concept and then morphed into something a lot more kid-friendly. While they maintain the cat-eating jokes throughout the show, there are a couple of other things that they tamed down as the show progressed. Alf definitely has a more surly, gruff attitude in the early episodes, which are tamed down later on. And he has a few more adult characteristics early on, like popping a beer, which were tamed out as the show became a bigger hit, especially with children, and cartoons and dolls and toys were introduced. But the magic isn't just with Alf on this TV show. If he didn't have a fantastic family to play off, the show wouldn't work. Playing Willie Tanner is the hilarious Max Wright, who I think is largely responsible for the popularity of Alf. His nervous, neurotic, obsessive-compulsive character is the perfect foil for the walking disaster of Gordon Shumway. See, Alf is the one that everybody remembers because he's furry and he's funny and he's cute. But what a lot of people forget is this is actually a comedy duo show, and the real gold of the show is the interactions between Willie and Alf. The rest of the cast is fantastic as well. The wife, Kate Tanner, is played by Anne Shedeen, or Shedeen, not entirely sure how to pronounce it, but she is also perfectly hapless in this situation and suffering alongside Willie Tanner in a hilarious way. In the early episodes, she's the one who's especially frustrated with Alf and not on board with having this alien life form living with the family, but she does warm up as the season progresses. And the kids are great too. The older sister, Lynn Tanner, is played by the very talented Andrea Elson, who comes off as genuinely sweet. She's not just a pretty face bimbo type character like Kelly Bundy on Married with Children. She's intelligent, she's sweet, she's the girl next door. And Benji Gregory was great as the little boy Brian Tanner as well. His scenes with Alf are a hilarious contrast to Elliot and E.T., since Alf is a 200-year-old plus, gruff, streetwise, mature alien who can sometimes be a bad influence on this little boy. And longtime fans of Seinfeld will recognize one of Alf's neighbors, the nosy Raquel Ochmonek, played by Liz Sheridan, who was Jerry Seinfeld's mother on The Seinfeld Show. I was a huge fan of Alf growing up, both this show and the animated shows that came out a few years later. I wasn't sure how the show would hold up though. I did try watching it maybe about 10 or 15 years ago and I just couldn't get into it. But I gave it another shot, and I gotta say, I laughed throughout the entire first season. A lot of the jokes and social commentary are still relevant and really funny, and like I said, Paul Fusco's performance is really something to marvel at. The one big drawback, though, is the picture quality of the show. By this point, they had stopped shooting a lot of shows on film and instead switched to video, which was much faster and much cheaper. While all those old shows shot on film like Airwolf can now be digitally remastered in glorious high definition, Alf is unfortunately forever doomed to be in standard definition. And even as far as shows shot on video, this doesn't look very good. There are other shows from around the same time period which were also shot on video, which I have on DVD, and when I watch on my big screen TV, I can zoom in the shot to fill in the full 16:9 frame, and the image still looks pretty good. Pretty sharp, nice colors, but this show, even before zooming, the picture is not that sharp, the colors aren't that vibrant, and once I do punch in the screen to fill up the full 16:9 frame, it looks even worse. But don't let that discourage you. There is definitely a lot more substance here than style. So whether you grew up on Alf or you've never heard of him, this is definitely a set that you should give a try. I can't speak for the other seasons just yet. I've watched a few episodes of season 2 and I'm not really digging what Fusco is doing with the voice of Alf at this point. I haven't watched season 3. I've heard horrible things about season 4, so I'll have to see that for myself when I get to there. But as far as season 1 goes, I really loved it. Really funny stuff. Leave an ALF memory below, share the video if you liked it, and to join the tribe, hit subscribe.
How about